Hello, my name is Lillian. I'm a grateful believer in Jesus Christ who struggles with anger, deep depression, hi, deep depression, and severe PTSD from my childhood. This is my story of hope. I grew up in New York City, the Bronx, with a little brother and an older sister. We lived in many areas of the Bronx, and all of those neighborhoods were filled with hopelessness, pain, and much anger. I used to live with a father that was manic depressive, an alcoholic, a homosexual, and a child molester. My dad had the characteristics that reflected a person who held a lack of remorse or shame for the things he did to myself and my family. He could change his demeanor in an instant. My dad would go from a fit of violent behavior to as calm as a baby lamb. My PTS developed as a young child. I witnessed my father beat my mother repeatedly, some days almost to the point of death. My dad assaulted anyone he wanted and whenever he wanted. It was just what he did, and the whole family lived with it. This was our family secret. Everyone was terrified of my dad and the things he would do to you or would get others to do for him. I grew up in a constant fear for my life in an almost lifelong flight or fight mentality. As a child at night, I would hide under the dirty blankets that covered my bed, hoping that my dad wouldn't open the bedroom door in a fit of rage because of something someone did or didn't do. I was often the physical and mental targets of his assaults if my mother wasn't around. Using the bathroom in our apartments were often awkward, uncomfortable, and just plain weird. He would hover and ask questions until we were done, so our showers were often quicker than blinking. We never wanted to take them while he was around, so we were dirty and smelly. My siblings and I were just a couple of smelly little Puerto Rican kids. Stereotype accomplished. That's funny. Here is a moment at the hands of my father that I can never forget and formed the way I looked at my life. My father was yelling at my very old grandmother for money. Before anyone could see what the commotion was about, within seconds, my father hit my dear grandmother so hard she fell to the ground. My grandmother had a massive heart attack and shortly died in the hospital that night. The cops came, the ambulance came. The paramedics asked the grown-ups how this happened, and they received a story, the wrong story. My father hit my grandmother, his mother, so hard he caused her to have a heart attack. I still can remember this day and the look in my grandmother's eyes as she passed on like it was just yesterday. It was as if she was looking at me and didn't want me to say anything. My grandmother still wanted to protect her son, my father, the man who took her life. I saw this in slow motion. I can still see it today. As I speak, I remember how I felt, alone, scared, and in danger. The one person that protected me was gone, and I knew who killed her, my father. What was I going to do now? No one would listen to me, no one cared, and I was broken. As a child, my heart had been filled with scars so deep that if you looked into my eyes, you would see them. But to my horror, this was not the last time I would see someone killed. On occasion, I had to go to the store for food. Well, I lived near a couple of gangs, and they knew me because I ran errands almost every day. One day, they were at a park that I would pass daily. Guess what they were doing? They were beating up a person, and yes, they killed him, and I saw it. All they did was look at me and smile with their fingers to their lips, and I knew that I was never to tell a soul, so I didn't. And from that day on, this gang had my back, I guess. After getting home that day, I apparently acted weird. It's not every day you see a murder all because of someone's color. What did my dad do? Yep. That night I caught a beating because my dad said I was acting weird and he knew that I did something wrong. Still, after that black eye and fiery headache from all the punches to my head, I still never told him. You know, I felt safer with that gang members than my family. Why? Because I had value with them, because I had a secret and a bond that only I could break with them. Whew, let's take a breather, huh? Anybody know some funny jokes? Just kidding. Let's get to more of the rough stuff, huh? Here I go. My father practiced Santeria. This was a very old cult that came from the West Indies. My dad practiced this cult and many others, but this was the one that he stuck with. He had many statues around the house with many candles. My father would often make me pray to these statues and light their candles. When he would do this, I didn't pray to them. I talked to God and asked him why my father was crazy and why he didn't help us get away from our father. This outraged my sister when he would make me pray to these statues of these false idols, but she didn't help at all. Actually, what she did was cause our father to get angry and hit her. As a result of his anger towards my sister, I needed to act quick and cause our father to switch his anger towards me, as my sister was tiny and not strong enough to endure his relentless assaults. It was okay because this gave me thick skin for what was to come. If you haven't noticed, I haven't mentioned much about my mother. She finally had enough and left. I know she didn't forget us. She barely got out alive. It was evident she would be the next one to die. The only thing I remember about my mom is that she was always working, never home, and always drinking. One day I got the courage to buy my mom a Mother's Day present and met her at a bus stop. I ran all the way across from Fordham Road, one of the busiest streets in the Bronx, to give it to her. I was so excited because I knew that she would love it. I went to give it to my mother, give my mother her gift, and she denied it and said, "I don't want that. Go back with your father." And she boarded the city bus and left me standing there rejected, brokenhearted, and alone. I ran back to my father, and as he always did, he told me, "See, she doesn't even want you. No one does." I took my gift and I dumped it in the trash. This abusive pattern seemed to have no end in sight. While my father was heavily involved in this cult, he took me to a bodega, which is Spanish for a convenience store. All the way in the back of the store where Santeria cult peoples could go and get their supplies, such as animals for sacrifices and other unusual items. It was here that I was physically assaulted and sexually abused by a witch doctor. My life as I knew it was sad, but in this very moment, it turned into hopelessness. This was the day where my child innocence left my soul. My trust in others, my self-worth as a human being vanished. I was less than a human. I was just like those animal sacrifices I saw that were thrown away like trash. I was no longer a child. This witch doctor told me that day I would be alone for the rest of my life and that I was nothing but garbage. This witch doctor placed a curse on me, or so she thought. She cursed me and said I would never have anyone to care for me, love me, and I would never trust again. My very own father watched all this take place and never once rescued me. Would this be it? Was this what all I was meant for? My innocence was taken away from me. My dark brown eyes went dim. I could feel my heart filled with rage and harden like a stone. I grew to hate the human race and everyone around it. I swore that this would never happen to me again. My father's homosexuality also grew out of control. He brought more men over. Each time it was someone different. I would often wake to see these strange men sitting in my living room. On one cold day, one of my father's male companions had to take us to school. He was an enormous man and a Golden Glove boxer in the Bronx. While my brother and I were sitting in the car waiting for school to let us in, he decided to horseplay with my brother. This man became aggressively persistent with my brother in a more of a sexual nature. He was about to assault my brother, and I was not about to have it. I took action and yelled towards my brother to run away. My brother ran out of the car. Once again, I had to fight for my life. Then it happened again. I was raped a second time, and I wasn't even out of the 7th grade. Why? I don't know. But I saved my brother, and at that time, that was all that mattered. I learned how to cover up my pain. It was easy. Take yourself out of the moment and absorb your environment. Now act like everyone expects you to. I became like a chameleon. Did I mention that almost all of my male friends my father tried to sexually abuse? He went to jail once for this. My dad enjoyed car rides. One time he took me to Hunts Point, a rough area near the end of the street which we lived on. He told me to get out of the car and go with this man that was on the street. This man was a pimp. My dad wanted to give me away for nothing. I once again fought for my life and took a beating again for it. That day, my father told me he was in control of everything. Let's fast forward a little bit. By the time I was in junior high school, I went from a kid filled with bleeding wounds that grew into a teen with anger issues, plagued with depression, and suffered from severe PTSD. How did I get this all out? I got into trouble a lot. I caused fights at school. I locked my math teacher in her teacher's closet for a whole 45-minute period. I was a kid filled with hate, and I was battling issues that I didn't know how to recover from. I needed someone to press in and talk and ask. I tried to commit suicide by walking in front of a city bus, as I knew that this would be quick. These New York City bus drivers are angry and drive really fast. But I thank God my dear brother returned the favor and saved my life that day. My dad often threatened us with knives to our necks or to our sides, and sometimes he would even take out his rusty machete and hold it to our necks if we talked back to him or even looked at him, right after he told us to look at him. Crazy, huh? When was this going to stop? I just grew angrier and lost all hope and trust in people. I started to cut myself. Now in high school, more fights, more hate, more issues. One fight I had, I stabbed a gang member in the leg. But let me say this, I was once again protecting my little brother. So what did I have to live for? I was angry with God for all of these horrific things that just kept happening to my siblings. One day I was so angry, I looked up into the sky and shook my fist to God and told him I hated him. How could he let this happen to us? I didn't understand, and I couldn't see the reason or the purpose for all of these mistreatments and despair. My sister was the first born-again Christian in our family. She turned her life over to Jesus Christ at a Jimmy Swaggart convention. That's funny. My sister told me after a long fight with her, I needed Jesus. I didn't know what that meant, but I did it, and as far as I can see, I won that fight. Life didn't get any easier. In fact, I married at a young age, and my father introduced my first husband to homosexuality. I, of course, could not handle this, and after a few years of marriage, I began divorce proceedings. I didn't think that God kept his promise, so I walked away from him and tried a life of hard work. The more I worked, the easier I could suppress the thoughts about my life and my issues. This did not work. I married again. The short story is he cheated on me, fell in love with a girl he met on Xbox, and kicked me out of my home. This was an all-time low in my life. My depression was at its highest. My thoughts ran so fast. I had many days of planning how I would take my own life. During this all-time low of my life, I gave God one last prayer. I prayed to Jesus that if he would help me recover, I would never look back and I would seek him alone for the rest of my life. So I gave it my last hope. My hope is that mustard seed in the Bible. My sister helped me find a church in Buffalo. I started seeking God and what he had promised. Started attending Bible studies, serving as the soundboard tech, worship design team, cleaning crew, anything I could do to serve God. I wanted to be a part of his plan. During one of my Bible studies I attended, I met a very nice lady. She at one point told me about her son and how she wanted me to meet him. I said, I was like, what, lady? No, thanks. So guess what happened? He came back from Iraq in 2006, and he started attending my church. My church. Somehow God orchestrated this connection. We had all the same friends, and somehow he got on my soundboard team. Our friends started to see a connection, and one of our dear friends, Aaron, actually came out and said, seriously, guys, why aren't you guys dating? So the rest is history. Bill Natalgia is my husband and my favorite person on this earth. We grew together in Jesus. We were both determined to live for God, and he guided us into another church. Here, God had a group of men ask Bill if he would consider starting a program called Celebrate Recovery. It gets funnier. What came out of Bill's mouth was, absolutely I will, when he was thinking, heck no. God had other plans. So we started to Celebrate Recovery. We trained our leaders, and we started step studies. I knew very quickly I was a hot mess. I didn't like the person I saw on the paper in my journal. I needed Celebrate Recovery so desperately, so it was on. I did what was required, shared with my sponsor and accountability partners. I grew to understand my triggers and gained tools to put in place of those triggers, and took away the enemy's power over my past. We started to attend Celebrate Recovery One-Days. We learned what to do from Pastor John and Cheryl and the rest of the national team. Then we brought it all back and shared everything with our leaders. We've been to countless numbers of summits and dozens of One-Days, and we learn more and more each time. Our ministry grows with each new lesson we gain from these events. All I have gone through is nothing, and I give God the glory for keeping me from a life without him. He is the reason why I stand here today. He is the reason that gives me strength to press on. Listen, we live in a fallen world, and people will do things to each other because of this. I have forgiven my father for the things that he has done to me, but for my safety, I keep a healthy boundary between him and I. I'm rebuilding my relationship with my mother, and I stand here recovering from anger, healing from my sexual abuse, learning to live with my depression and my PTSD. God is bigger than my yesterdays. He knows my plan, and God makes all things right. God has given me a great tool to work through my recovery process. Guess what it is? Celebrate Recovery. God has helped me to uncover my many dysfunctional behaviors. Today, I understand what my triggers are, and when I start to become angry, I know how to handle it. I say a prayer, I call my sponsor, and I read God's word. I understand what healthy relationships are and how to have healthy boundaries. I wish I would have had the program like The Landing as a young girl. This program teaches young adults how to unpack any hurt, hang-up, or habit. The Landing is a place where teens can find acceptance and have a safe place to share and work on their struggles. Teens need a place to belong in this often cruel world. If I had that in my life, it would have been very different. Remember when I shared how angry I was at God and how I shook my fist at God? That day, God told me, wait and see, and he would redeem my past for his glory. Not long ago, in December of 2015, Mac Owen called me to ask me a question. He asked me if I would consider becoming the National Landing Coordinator. As Mac spoke, that angry moment with God 30 years ago also came rushing back to me, and I saw this young girl shaking her fist at God on the streets in the Bronx. Then God said, see, you have a voice. Now use it for my purpose. If you don't have a landing at your Celebrate Recovery, you are short-changing your teens, yourself, and your community. Start one today, and you may be saving the life of your next generation of church leaders. Thank God, Celebrate Recovery. Thank God for Celebrate Recovery. It has given me a place to feel loved and accepted as an adult. Jesus is my identity, not my past pain or the mistakes I've made. I leave you all with my life verse, Genesis 50:20. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. Thank you for letting me share.